Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. This is your host, Marc Bautis. On today's show, we have John Williams. John, how's it going?
Hello, Marc.
We also brought on a special guest, Shellee Howard. Shellee's the founder and CEO of College Ready and CR Tutoring and Test Strategies. She's a college graduate, a Certified Independent College Strategist, a best-selling author, and a member of the Higher Education Consultants Association and Society of Financial Awareness. Shellee's traveled around the world helping students create their standout strategy. She knows what it takes to compete in the top tier schools, as well as finding the best fit college for all students. Shellee believes that no two students are the same, and each student must have their own strategy and plan to be successful. Shellee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So college planning, it's on a lot of people's minds right now. You got kids going back to school, some kids starting college for their freshman year. And then there's also was a student loan forgiveness program announced last week. So I'm looking forward to today's topic. How did you get started being in college consulting and helping students and families out with planning for college?
So it hit me as a parent, like most parents. It was my firstborn. He came home from 8th grade and he says, "Mom, I know exactly what I want to do." And I'm like, really? Because I still get confused sometimes if this is what I should be doing. He says, "Oh yeah, I want to be a brain surgeon. I want to go to a top tier school." And I was like, great. And he turned around and I panicked. I was like, there's no medicine in our family. Where is this coming from? I was the first to go to college on both sides of my family. So this is a massive leap. I really didn't have support. He didn't have support. And so I knew it was up to me to make that happen. Long story short, when he graduated from high school, I will say he did do everything I recommended. Not all kids do, he did. And he had 7 top tier schools and 3 full ride offers. He ended up going to Harvard and graduating in 4 years pre-med debt free.
Oh, wow. That's great.
College Ready started all by itself after that.
As financial planners, we see a lot where people will look at a particular aspect of financial planning and it can become overwhelming. And I think college planning is one of those types of areas. And what happens is it's overwhelming and they just stick their head in the sand and say, you know what, hopefully it works itself out. Mm-hmm. When does someone start planning for college? And then what are their first steps? Is there like a checklist or a menu of things someone should do?
So I always help families get very clear first on what is most important to them. Is it the academic fit, the social fit, or the financial fit? If it's, I really need scholarships or my kid can't go, that's one strategy. If it's, I really don't want to pay for college, but I can if I have to, that's a different strategy. Or, you know what, just get them in and I'm happy to write a check. That is a third strategy. So depending on the strategy is when is the best time. If somebody's looking for a full or partial full ride offer, big merit scholarships, the sooner the better, because the FAFSA looks at the second semester of the sophomore year and the first semester of the junior year. So getting a family's financial house in order, and what I mean by that is having the assets in the right categories to lower their expected family contribution, that has to happen sooner than that timing. So if a family, gets started their senior year, the financial merit and big time scholarships are very rarely going to happen. We started when my son was in 8th grade and we started strategizing where the assets were. We started strategizing how we were going to lower our expected family contribution and put him in the best position. A lot of people get confused. So the 529 plan can be an awful, awful situation if you're an entrepreneur. It can actually cause more harm than good. And a lot of people don't realize that. It happened to me personally. And so I found out the hard way. They wanted to take my son's scholarship away from Harvard because I did such a great job saving on my own that they didn't feel I needed their money. Well, I moved my 529 plan to the second child. And all of a sudden, the scholarship came back, $63,000 a year. So helping families understand how to best position themselves, because what happens is if a family just goes, let's wait and see, that's the quickest way to going into debt or taking on a loan. We do it very different. We make sure that the family can afford the college before they apply. So it's a very different strategy.
I know you mentioned starting in 8th grade. You talked a little bit on the financial side, but can students at that age, or can their parents or families at that age also answer those other questions? Whether you're looking for a social school or maybe even what they want to study and does the school offer what they're looking for? Do you think that's too early, or that is a right time even to start approaching those topics as well?
It really depends on your child. Number one, I say a majority of students are really ready to start as soon as they promote from 8th grade. That summer before 8th grade and 9th grade counts for college. And it's the most underutilized time. They could be doing community service. They can be doing leadership. They can be doing extracurriculars. They can really start to build their resume and get a jump start picking all the right classes for the next 4 years. So the better they can start and plan, the rest is so much easier. Usually when I pick up a student late, I'm sorry, you didn't know, or how come, and it's a lot of frustration. Maturity plays a big part in it, right? We don't jump in 8th grade and say, what college do you want to go to and what do you want to major? No, it's what are you passionate about? What are your gifts and your talents? What are your core values? And let's start exploring with some internships or some research or some service. That is how we start planning when they're younger. As they get older, we need to start helping them get clear on what is their 5-year plan? What is their college to career look like? And how we can help them get there.
You mentioned some things like community service, extracurricular activities. What's the most important thing for a student to focus on? Is it test scores? Is it GPA? Is it extracurriculars, community service, something else, or a mixture of, you want to be strong in all those?
Number one, always is the GPA. There's nothing more important. There are schools that if a student doesn't have a certain GPA, they won't even be considered, automatically go in the circle file. And it needs to be with rigor. For a student who has taken all the easy classes and got a 4.0, they will never stand up against a student who's taken 6 AP classes and got a 5.0. So rigor and GPA will always be the most important. The quickest way to free money is their test score.
I guess that's because that's a way to compare.
It's a very easy way to compare if a student is excelling or not excelling, and they want to give them money for their hard work. Getting a perfect 36 on the ACT is not easy, but with the effort, it can be done.
And what do the top tiers look for? How do they approach it? Do they approach it differently than other schools? And then how, vice versa, how should the student approach applying to a top tier versus maybe some other type of school?
So, it makes complete sense that you have to do what you would at a regular school plus some. So a school like Harvard, Yale, even Stanford, there are things that they're looking for that are a bit different. An example would be, instead of community service where you sign up and show up, like feeding the homeless, tutoring, things that most students do anyway, that is not even close to being good enough for a top tier school. Top tier schools are looking for that next level where a student figures out what are they passionate about, what do they advocate for, and then they lead others to change the world. And that is a top tier school. So it's really taking everything to the next level. I tell families, think of it as a business. If you're the owner of a business, any business, and somebody comes to you with a resume, it's their first job and you like them, you're going to give them minimum wage. If somebody comes to you with a very deep resume with lots of examples of success, you're going to give them a lot more money. Same exact thing. It's so similar, and yet people don't see it.
the merit-based scholarships, it's my understanding that a lot of these top tier schools don't even give any merit-based scholarships. Is there a way that you kind of speak to some of our listeners as to how that works and how you might be able to look at it and compare schools that may have a stronger merit-based award program versus like a Harvard, which with a school like Harvard, the battle is really getting in for obvious reasons. Right. And then they have a strong financial aid program, but I understand that their merit-based program is not. How does that pertain to some of these other fringe type activities kids can do, like community service?
So to answer your first question, the Ivies, they don't call it merit-based. That's the bottom line. But they have very deep pockets. I don't care what you call it. If you get in, they guarantee that you will make it. So it doesn't matter what you call it. All I saw when we got there is they flew us out there. They wined and dined us. They took really good care of us. And then they said, great, this is awesome. What's interesting about the Ivies is they have to have diversity, but not just in ethnicity. They have to have West Coast, East Coast, Southwest. So based on geography. Well, my son coming from the West Coast he was considered very diverse. A white male coming across the US to go to school was unique. And that school had just gotten a little bit in trouble about having too many Asians in their population. And so that was a big draw. Then he was pre-med, which is a diverse major in itself. So again, it comes down to thinking of it like a business and what do they need to be successful? They can't have all engineers. They can't have all economics. So they're looking for not having the same type of student because, somebody from the East Coast handles socially very different from the West Coast. And so having a mix of students is really very important for them. So to answer, there is a ton of money if you can get in at those top tier schools. I like people to understand it's like test optional. Kids want to believe it's optional. What I think is very unfortunate is schools aren't being totally transparent because if our students are writing it in an essay that they worked hard to get a 36 on their ACT, how optional is it? That's the kind of thing you have to be careful when you Google your question because you're going to get a zillion answers. And what we're finding is if the student just focuses on being the best they can be, they get into the best school they're qualified to go to. And as simple as that sounds, the top tier schools are looking for a holistic approach because they have tons of students with a perfect GPA, tons of students with a perfect test score. Tell me what else you have. That's where it gets really unique. And they're not looking for students who are doing what everybody else is doing. So it's taking a 17 and 18-year-old and helping them to really think a lot bigger and out of the box if they want to go to a top tier school.
What are some of those either extracurricular activities or community service that would help a student stand out?
So we are certifiers for the Presidential Community Service Award, which is a national award by our president. We are certifiers for the Congressional Award. Our students can earn 8 gold, silver, and bronze awards, which are nationally ranked. When it comes to activities, honors, and awards, it goes to international award, national, regional, local, school. So for students who are providing, I got 8 Dean's List and somebody else is having 8 national awards, that is the difference.
I'm actually going to circle back on top tier. I think it might be helpful to have some framework for our listeners to understand where we might be talking about where things change and what we're considered by top tier.
So people look at it very uniquely, depending on if they want to look at it by geography. Some people would say Stanford is the best on the West Coast. If you look at it nationally, Stanford is not. So it really depends on which way you want to slice it and dice it. Penn is considered a top tier school in some areas, and in other areas it is not. So helping get clear, what is a top tier for the student? We talk about picking the right colleges as being the number one most important thing a student does when they apply to college. Because if they're applying to schools that are all reach, which means their GPA is lower, their test score is lower, they have less service hours, they have less leadership, they have less extracurricular, they shouldn't be expecting to get into that level school. So having some reach or top tier schools, it's great. I encourage students to dream big and to think out of the box, but you don't want everything to rest on those schools because that would be a dangerous situation. So then we help students understand, well, who got into what school and what does that look like for my student? So we look at the 7 most important factors that we can analyze to help a student see based on who got in last year, what are their chances? So we have built a custom portal with all of our intellectual property where we can actually show a student based on their GPA, their test scores, their service, their leadership, their extracurricular, letters of recommendation, and essay, what are their chances? Now, it's still not perfect because the essay is very subjective. The essay we call is the icing on the cake. If they have all the same statistics as the other person who's applying to the same major, and diversity-wise, they're exactly the same, that essay could be absolutely the deal breaker. So it really looks at the holistic student, not just at a piece of who they are, to see what is the best fit for each school.
Then how do you correlate, that portal with those different, those 7 factors that can kind of look at your chances or probability of a particular school? Correlate that to the financial aspect of it, right? Where maybe they're just way off, they're looking at schools that financially they probably shouldn't be. And then that's a lot of times you see that's how people get into the student loans and then the debt after college. How do you consult on that aspect of it? Or do you just flat out come out and say, you should be looking at these types of schools versus these price schools?
We absolutely are straight up honest. We can tell parents at a reach school where you would be very lucky just to get in, there will not be merit money. Because again, take it back to the business concept of owning a business. The big resume equals big money. The no resume equals no money. So if you're applying to a school that you're underqualified for, if you get in, they're not going to give you merit scholarships. So then we get clear on what is a good fit. Well, a good fit is going to be based on what that student brings and who got in last year. If they have a 50-50 chance of getting in, there should be some money involved if they apply with the right major and the right strategy. A lot of times a student, I'll ask them, what school do you want to go to? And they'll say something like UC Santa Barbara. And I'm like, and why? And they'll go, have you not seen the view? It's Isla Vista. And you have to giggle. And I'm like, are we going on vacation? And that is their reason for being. When I take it to the next level and I say, okay, so what do you want to do there? Well, I want to do engineering. I want to do chemical. And then I show them that they may not have chemical engineering. They're like, oh. So the families are not digging in. They're allowing their 17-year-old to pick it based on a football team, a basketball team, a location. How far can they get from their parents? I mean, I have heard it all. And so I help families really get crystal clear about the academic fit, the social fit, and the financial fit before they apply. I tell them, be transparent with their student. Unfortunately, in high school, they do not teach financial literacy of what $300,000 in college loan debt feels like when they graduate. Yeah. Shellee does. Shellee helps them to see if you go into social work and you go into $400,000 in debt for a college degree, how long will you work for free? This is a game I play with them all the time. And they're like, well, I don't want to work for free, because there's no concept for them of what that looks like. They're just used to their parents pulling out a credit card and somehow it gets paid and they pay the mortgage and There's just nothing there for them. And so when families you know what, I'm going to just let Johnny do this because it's time for them to step up and figure this out. And I'm like, no, this is not time for Johnny to get involved with finances. So it is important that it is a family discussion prior to that commitment. Like I said, I have multi-million-dollar clients who are happy to write the check. And then I have some who are like, I'd rather use that money to buy a down payment on their first home. Everybody has their own way of wanting to play this game. And therefore, it's important to understand what is important to that family.
Yeah, we get that a lot with like NYU out here. You know, it's so cool to live in New York, but
Yeah.
they don't give anybody anything. And it's setting those expectations is tough because you know, as a parent, you want your kid to be happy. And if a kid gets their expectations too high and too far down the road, it's harder to kind of like get them away. With that said, like earlier on, looking at these things and planning ahead, every college is going to have their net price calculator. I'm curious how you found them to be, and I know they're not all created equal. Some might have better ones, more details, and I'd love to hear your opinion on those and like how those kind of fit into the whole thing and how accurate you've seen those to be.
If a family looks at them, say in 8th grade or their freshman year, it's a really good benchmark, and that's all it is. Just like the sticker shock the first time, like, what, you want me to pay all of that? Like, that's really when it gets real about the cost of college. Then, if it's still early enough, we can make sure their assets are in the right category that will not be counted against them. An example would be taking all of the money out of their student's name. That is assessed at a much higher rate than the families. People don't know that, right? And so they just are funneling money, grandparents, everybody's putting money in that kid's name. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you really want to pay full price? So it really comes down to educating families of what the FAFSA does consider in order to lower their expected family contribution, because a lot of people can move money and it makes complete sense. They just don't know that they can or what they should do. And I don't sell financial products. I am not a CFP. I am an advisor. So all I do is I help families ask questions to wonderful people like yourself, who you can then look at their whole assets, all of their retirement, all of their strategy, and look at the best ways to help them to reduce their expected family contribution. After doing this 15 years, I have seen some really amazing things, totally legal, totally ethical, that have been very strategic for families to be able to open up a lot of area of merit and even need-based. People who think, we live in California, there's no way we're getting need-based. We couldn't live here if we needed need-based. But in all reality, if they get their financial house in order and they can lower their expected family contribution, there are ways to qualify for different grants and scholarships. So a lot of it is strategy, long and short term. And that's what I help families understand is knowledge is everything. You could do your own taxes or go to a CPA who knows all the tax code and save a boatload of money. To me, that is what certified financial planners do. That is what financial analysts do. They can look at everything and look at what is the best short-term and long-term strategy for your family. That is not what I do. My goal is to help the family get their financial house in order, make sure the student is the very best they can be with a very solid resume and strategy, help them to know what are the most generous colleges where they will receive merit, and that is how people graduate without debt. So it takes the whole strategy, not just a piece of it.
And just going back to that, we're building that resume. I know one of the things you mentioned that's important is the essay. How should someone approach the ways that some tips that can make the essay stand out?
Absolutely. Really, number one is a student needs to realize they're going to have to write between 4 and 18 essays per college. This is where people are like, you're kidding me. When I went, it was 2 essays. that is a reality. There is one school right now on the East Coast that has 18 essays for one application. So knowing that you cannot write about the same topic 18 times, that means you need 18 experiences. Do you see where we start to break it down and simplify it? Then when you strategize, if we know what is going to be on the Common App and you need to answer 4 out of the 7 Common App prompts, and I know what the prompts are right now, if a student can't answer 4, we got to go create 4 experiences to write an essay about. Then you take, here's all the essay prompts, here's all of my students' experiences, their core values, their passions, their advocacy, and then you start to do a strategy and match up. What are you going to tell the college about yourself and answer this prompt? So it's a very strategic. It is not, unfortunately, many people approach it as, tell me about a time you did something for somebody else that did not benefit yourself. Well, I mowed the lawn of my neighbor's yard. I've seen it that basic. And then I've also seen it where students are like, I became very passionate about the kids who have no clothing in Africa. So what did I do? I learned how to sew. And after I learned how to sew, I taught my friends how to sew. And then we got gently used pillowcases and we turned them into little dresses. And then we attached it to Doctors Without Borders who delivered it to all these little children. And do you see the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It really comes down to good, better, and best.
Is there a right number of schools to apply to? Like you'll hear, I'm going to apply to my REACH school, my school that I hope to get in, and then a safe school, or what's the best way to approach the number of schools?
If a family is concerned about finances, if they want any kind of money, they need to do at least 12 schools. That's the bottom line. Out of that, we usually get offers, strong offers from at least 3 to 4. Last year, our students, we had 51 seniors get $17.6 million in scholarships. If you do the math, that beats the stock market. So strategically applying to the right school with the right student, the REACH schools, remember, they're not getting money. So it comes down to the comfort and safety schools and making sure that those schools are generous. There are plenty of schools students will not get a dime at. I think it's important they know before they apply that they're looking at a full price tag. The problem is there's nothing on Google that will tell them that. So it's 15 years of experience that can tell me, I had a student apply there last year. This is how much money they got. I had a student, you know what I mean? I can pull from so many resources that I'm able to tell a family doing it on their own, they'll have no idea.
Is there any going back and forth with the school? So let's say someone applies, They come back with an offer. Is that the offer and that's take it or leave it? Or can you go back to the school and try and negotiate with them?
Absolutely. It's called a financial reconsideration. And it is definitely a strategy. And we use that as part of building our list. If we know a family, again, money's important to them, that they want to have the best deal possible, then yes, we will apply to schools that are similar, that are more generous. And then we will ask for a financial reconsideration and give them a reason why. You can't just say, I want more money. Like, it's like, well, so do I, But if a student, has just become an AP scholar since they applied and had a financial offer, they have to give them something more. You can't just randomly ask for more money. There has to be a reason. It's like getting off the wait list. You can't just say, but I really want to go there. You have to give them a better test score. You have to give them something. It's interesting. I have to help parents realize, go and put on your business thought process. You would never walk up and buy a home based on the flyer, pick up the flyer and go, yep, that's the price I'm paying. But yeah, for college, people do that. It's so bizarre, right? And even to buy a car, you would never walk up to the lot and go, oh yeah, that sticker price looks really great on that window. I'm just going to pay you that much money. Why would you do it for college? Not one of my students has paid full price for college because it is a business. college is in the business of putting students through the process, but it's still very much a business.
Is there a resource where you can see how colleges have awarded in the past?
We've built one internally. I have not seen one outside of the company. So I haven't seen one on Google or, just randomly out there. I'm sure it's got to be in place somewhere. I just know for College Ready, what we have been able to achieve with the right student in the right college. But as far as a resource for just a parent, not that I'm aware of yet. I know a couple companies who've been working on it for several years, but that amount of data is seriously going into the weeds and trying to pull out some similarities. The challenge is truly, this is how I help students understand. If they are looking for somebody from the West Coast to be a Spanish major who wants to then study internationally, it's just so specific that it's not as easy as saying, everybody applying to UT gets $50,000 in scholarships. It can never come down to that because that's not how they roll. They award students based on if they need you and if you qualify and if they want you.
Shellee, you gave some great advice. Before we wrap up, are there any additional either tips or common mistakes you see parents and students making that they should avoid?
Absolutely. Starting late is the biggest problem. Back in the day, we could start the junior year and still have time to figure it out. It has become so complex and so expensive. The sooner a family can have this conversation and start to plan, the better. And then finally, be careful not to do what your best friend or neighbor is doing. That is not going to help you. Being the same is not good in this process. Being genuinely, uniquely that student is truly going to benefit them much more.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. Shellee, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. How best can someone reach out to you, find out more about what you do?
Absolutely. So for your listeners, I'd like to give them a free copy of my best-selling book, and it is How to Send Your Student to College Without Losing Your Mind or Your Money. And so if your listeners would like a copy of that book, the link, it is freebook.collegereadyplan.com, freebook.collegereadyplan.com. And that will at least get you started on the road to success for college planning.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll link to that in the show notes. And thank you everyone for tuning in today.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.